everyone in the room. Welcome to the Mouthfuls. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Someone who's been lightening up our community with her wit, charm, and undeniable talent. Please join me in welcoming Janelle, the beloved host of the Mouthfuls. Since her debut on September 27th, 2022, Janelle has hosted an impressive 32 events, each one leaving the members in stitches and craving more. Known for her polished delivery and personable demeanor, Janelle has quickly become a cherished figure in our community. I've only recently come to know her interest in stand-up comedy and her journey from a stand-up comedy novice to a seasoned performer is nothing short of inspiring, and today I'm fortunate enough to delve into her journey. So without further ado, let's dive into the conversation, Janelle. Welcome.
Wow, thank you for that introduction, Yang. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know if like a lot of people know that this is something I do, but it's great that a lot of you guys are interested in this.
So
Thanks for that.
not a lot of us know about that, Janelle. Who have you mentioned about it to in our community?
Actually, I remember the first time I mentioned it to you guys. I think it was in one of Liam's events, or I just mentioned it in passing, and so like probably like the participants in that session and just some of my closest friends here in this server know. Yeah, so I think just a handful, but most of the participants, I'm not sure if they have any idea that I actually do that.
No, I have a terrible memory, and I am sorry for forgetting about that. Yes, so you right now tell us how often do you perform?
Well, recently I've been performing more frequently. But I'm not super consistent just because it is something that I do for fun. It's just recreational for me. I guess I could say I do it on average about like twice a month or thrice if on a good month. Since the year started, yeah. But like since last year it's been inconsistent. So
What kind of a joy does performing stand-up give you? Can you describe that?
yeah, it's actually just it's I am not sure about joy. It's more of a rush that I feel just because of how nerve-wracking it really is. It's just more of it's overcoming the challenge of performing. I think it's just more of an adrenaline rush that I feel, and that's the thing that kind of brings me joy, I guess, or wanting more of it, just because I love wanting to be able to do that, to be able to, overcome that nervousness. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I I've never performed before, but I could imagine when you're on the stage, you tell a joke. Sometimes the joke works and sometimes it doesn't. And like you said, the adrenaline rush, the challenge, and
Yeah,
that feeling of anticipation and nervousness in a way.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And what was your very first experience with stand-up comedy?
Oh my gosh, it's been a while. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I've restarted doing this since last year, but I've actually the first set I did was back in college several years ago. The first experience I had with stand-up comedy was really the same as now. Like it's exhilarating, and it was it felt like fulfillment because I was in my head. I'm just so proud that I was able to do that. I think it's one of the like it's just such a vulnerable thing to do, to put yourself out there. And my very first experience, I remember it because I was I was I was discovering the scene, the local comedy, stand-up comedy scene here. I'm from the Philippines, by the way, and so I didn't know that we had like a stand-up scene that was similar to the stand-up I watch mostly in the West, right? And so I appreciated the craft more before I actually performed. So I really worked. I remember it was in college. I really was working on the material. I was writing it on a paper, kept on editing it. And it's interesting because the very first set that I did, the very first open mic that I performed was in pure English. It was an English set just because that's the stand-up comedy that I consumed, and that was how I usually express myself or my sense of humor. But that was the only English set that I did ever so far. I feel like generally I bombed. I guess I got a few laughs. I feel like that's why I haven't picked up on writing materials in pure English again. But the rest of my stand up is in my native language, which is, I don't know if that's interesting. Yeah.
That was indeed interesting. It it sounded like you had been influenced by materials from the West before your very first set. And as a result of that, the first set was in English. And following that, the vast majority of your materials were in Filipino. What was that
Yeah,
transition like?
I think it's because, well, prior to actually performing and, you know, like getting more involved with the local scene, I was only like, yeah, influenced by these like remote, like Western material. And it's definitely something that I could grasp the humor of just because of, you know, it's familiar to me. But it's I realize that even like the local stand-up comedy scene, it's just stand-up comedy in general. It's it's something that a lot of the material is relevant to the culture of that area or of that place. It's you know, the comedians try to be relatable and mention like references that are in the local context and something that's so. As I was like uh, going to more shows here and listening to more comedians or things like that, I then, you know, developed that different type of like writing like style in that's more influenced not just by my initial like discovery of stand up, but also like the actual stand up scene here.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. What speaks to you more, Janelle, culturally? Which the Western culture versus the scenes you're seeing in the Philippines and the influence you have been receiving from your fellow comedians there. What do you find most relatable? And where do you find that solid groundedness in terms of your material and the cultural setup?
Yeah, like I think it's interesting because even though there's like there's differences in culture, right? I think like something that speaks to me, like when I, or what I really enjoy in terms of stand-up comedy is like similar, like it's social issues that are, you know, made into satire or written into like this clever joke, but that can be applied in you know the social issues in the West, and even here it's like it's it's different social issues, but like but it, if you think, if I really think about it, it's like universal things like the I mean, it's not always like this, but this is just what speaks to me. Like, say the social, the different social classes, or like sexism and things like that. A lot of material, I think, are arise from those kind of topics, and that really interests me. I mean, in terms of you know the jokes that that really strike me and things like that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Social issues in clever jokes, in the sexism. Those are topics that resonate with you a lot, and you're absolutely right. They are indeed universal topics. Do you remember a figure, a person, or a moment that inspired you to give it a try from someone who's only at the level of I've watched stand-up comedies on TV or on YouTube, to a moment that I wanted to give it a try? I can imagine there are a lot of people here who are like me, who only aspire to tell jokes and get laughs. But there's always that nagging feeling of, can I do this? Can you tell us that moment that inspired you, or a person that inspired you to give it a try?
Yeah, so like, yeah, the moment that inspired me, I remember, I guess it's when I really like watched it here. Like my very first local like stand-up comedy show that I watched. It was like a small gig, you know. It was like a really intimate club where you know the comedians self-organized it. Like back then the production house, it wasn't like as successful as it is now, so it was just like creative people, college kids, just interested in the craft. And that's actually how I got, I mean, how, why I watched my first show, because one of my friends was just like, hey, you should watch, we should watch stand-up comedy. I think you'll really like it. And I was like, you know, I was more into music that time and going to shows and things like that, but anything creative was really, you know, interesting. I watched my first my first stand-up show, and there's like this notion of comedy here in the Philippines. I mean, of what comedy is, especially mainstream. I didn't know that there was like a stand-up comedy scene here. And when I watched my first show, like I saw, it was just like, I was in college as well. It was just a bunch of people also just writing material and performing it and delivering it. And I was like laughing and I was enjoying the show, but that's actually when I guess I I got motivated to and said to myself, "Hey, this is something that's not impossible for me." Yeah.
And uh, what were you? So, what were you? What was your level of speaking in public, or performing any kind of show in public? You like music? Did you perform, or were you a performer before attending the first live show?
No, not at all. I was just supporting my friends in bands mostly. Yeah, I mean like, we were learning guitar and stuff like that, but like no, nothing like, never performed in my life before that except for probably school things. So yeah, that was I think my very first experience of like performing anything.
I love it. I love this story so much. You know, it wasn't that dissimilar to today, you and I on the stage. And I've never hosted any podcast in my life. In that setting of it's a live show in a way, in small room, intimate room, and people that you can relate to. Janelle, in your case, it was a group of friends from college, someone that you look at and you see, oh, I can be like that too. If they could do it, I can do it too. And I really like that. And I hope today there will be a few of you who are here today and get inspired and one day wanted to become a comedian just like Janelle. I love that you were so curious. You looked at the show and in that spirit of, oh, I want to give it a try too. I love that a lot. Now let's I'm gonna take just a short brief moment. I want to check the stage chat. I just got pinged here. There was a question from Sir Casper. Everyone else who are in the room, if you wish to ask Janelle a question, there are two ways. You can request to speak and I'll bring you up to stage and you can ask the question live, or you can also ping me in the stage chat channel, which is a channel above stage. It's an outside chat. I have a question from Sir Casper. What comedians influenced your comedic style? So he's looking for a couple of comedians' names who have influenced you, Janelle.
Wow. Well, if we're talking about names, I really just started with the most popular ones, I think, like Ricky Gervais and Louis C.K. and then Ying and I talked about this, but Tig Notaro was one of the, like, I don't know, I just love her style because it doesn't necessarily need to have a lot of energy. It's just deadpan, and definitely gotten inspired by Bo Burnham. I'm not saying that these comedians, and I mean like my style is influenced directly by these comedians because they are stand-up comedians that I enjoy, and but my particular style, or any comedian's particular style, I think is you just look for your voice, and how you want to express yourself in this craft as you actually go, as you perform more and more. So I'm not like, it's so different from all of the comedians I mentioned, but yeah, those are some comedians like that I enjoy.
Very well answered that question. And what I took away is that there are comedians who influenced you, who you looked up to. At the same time, the process involves looking for and fine-tuning your own voice. In Janelle, in your case, it was the topics that you spoke about, the social issues, etc. And as a creator, as a comedian, for a creative process, to me, it's really important to have a brand, a personal brand, something that's so unique to you, the jokes that are so personal to you, and yet it's funny. To me, that's really important qualities from a comedian.
Yeah, definitely agree.
I hope that answered your question, Sir Casper. Janelle, back to you. What were some of the challenges you faced when you first started doing stand-up, and how did you overcome them?
Right. So, when I first started doing stand up, I had no idea that like it it had so much structure or principles and concepts that a lot of comedians actually are guided by. Like I just like when I watch stand up, like especially when I was younger, I just thought it was funny. I just thought it was funny people speaking, but I didn't know that it was like you have to work on your material and writing, and a lot of comedians will tell you that there's a formula to actually deliver and a successful joke. I mean, especially when you're starting. I guess what my challenge is, well, I think I'm still challenged by this, is material. Like it's I don't consider, I generally don't consider myself funny, like as a person in general, which is really interesting if because I'm doing stand-up comedy. It's because it's not about that. I don't I don't I don't think I have like a quick wit or like a sharp, like you know, like my sense of humor is just like, well, um I I guess what I'm trying to say is, yeah, a lot of the challenge, I think, especially back then, was just writing material, and then I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but like I used to write material, just things that I thought were funny, and it didn't have any structure to them, and I just thought that because in my head it was funny, it would work, but then I that's how I learned that a lot of the comedians would give advice to each other in shows. So a lot of people were saying to me that, beginners, they really think they can start off with storytelling. Storytelling is such an advanced like technique that professional stand-up comedians do. They make it sound and seem so natural, but there's actually still like a premise and a punchline in that story. So I used to just write and ramble without that structure. But because yeah, eventually I figured out that you know this it's a good idea to start with these formulas and just work my way with that. So that's mostly the challenge.
And we will, during today's event, we will get into the formulas Janelle mentioned, the process of writing jokes that beginners can use as a construct or a guide, like Janelle said. Janelle, before we do that, I have one follow-up question. This feeling of I'm not funny, and I've had this feeling my entire life. I don't think I'm funny. I tell that to myself. I also heard a ton from my close friends and family, and that's part of my identity now. Uh, you also mentioned that you had moments of self-doubt. I don't think I'm funny as well. So how do you pass this am I funny test? Or is there a I am funny or I am not funny as identity, or it's something that can be worked on? Is it born or is it learned?
I mean, because I know definitely something I think that can be learned. It's something that I just, in general, like in my daily, social interactions or professional, personal interactions, I feel like my demeanor is so serious, and a lot of people, seem more outgoing and things like that, and so that's why I just I consider myself, hey, I'm not a funny I'm not funny, that I'm not a like a jokester, like in the sense of like a class clown or things like that. But being not funny is I think completely separate from being able to perform stand up, because this craft, this art, something that I appreciated later on, is something that you can develop by writing, and everyone has a sense of humor. That's why I mentioned like deadpan comedians like Tig Notaro. I mean, they're well, she's very she has very great wit, and but like in general, like her, it's not like the comedians that, if you think of a comedian or someone that's funny with a lot of energy and just like that kind of concept. But like yeah, for being a stand-up comedian, I mean, as long as you find things funny, you have a sense of humor, you can try and write material that may resonate, with an audience. And that's why even though like in general, like I don't think like that's my personality, is like someone who's, funny in my daily life, I can still, I can still perform and write jokes that make people laugh, because it's the performance. It's not who I like. I'm not. So yeah, something like that.
I can relate to that. And even though I know I'm not funny, but I do enjoy when I say something and people laugh at it. It's just the moment that I cherish for. We have
Oh
another
yeah.
question. Yeah. We have another question from the stage. Let me take a look. Okay. There's a question from Tosca, your grandson. And by the
Oh.
way, Janelle, check out the stage chat channel. There are so many people who are hyping you.
Oh my gosh, I haven't been reading.
Yeah, Ray. Pigeon Man, Pigeon. Akbar is asking you to tell a joke. And he's got a lot of reactions. And
I'll throw
okay.
No, just kidding.
Okay, so there's a second request. I think he's serious. Akbar wants you to tell a joke. And let's first go to Tosca's question. Do you want to pursue stand-up moving onwards as a full-time comedian? And that's mentioning me, but I believe the question is addressed to you.
Yeah.
Do you?
Do I want to pursue stand up? Here's the thing. It's the one of the main reasons I was motivated back into doing this is because like the stand up scene here in the Philippines, it's been growing. It's been uh, becoming more successful. A lot more audiences, a lot bigger shows have been produced. I I think it was Women's Month, and more women comedian were becoming recognized in the scene, and I I I started doing stand up before them, but they were motivating me to go back because of it's just a different landscape now than it was back then. Because back then, well, even now, I guess like it's still like mostly men that's doing it, but that's something that I did. And these women that I mean I'm we're part of a group. They have like sponsorships and things like that. Right now, to answer Tosca's question, I think I'm just enjoying the open mic. I mean, the open mic is basically something that anyone can do. It's not like a professional show. It's just something that that is open for everyone. That's where I can improve my craft and just make people laugh. And if you're really serious about this, it has to have commitment. It has to have consistency, because that's where you try. That's where you get featured. That's where you get gigs. That's where you get offers. But I think right now I'm just enjoying the the hobby, but I don't know if I can like be as consistent and commit to that kind of career. I don't know, like, so yeah, right now I'm just having fun, I think, but definitely just not closed, I guess, to what can happen.
Well, I hope that answered your question, Tosca. And quick question to Janelle: what's the economics for open mic? Do you have to pay to perform, or do you get paid for performing at an open mic? For people who don't know, I don't know.
Yeah. So now the quick answer is no. You don't have to pay. It's very, it's very competitive though in terms of booking a slot to be able to perform. Just because, again, as I've mentioned, the comedy scene here has become more successful, and a lot more audiences are coming to shows. And an open mic, I think, as I've mentioned, it's just something where it's open to everyone. A lot of seasoned comedians, a lot of professional comedians, the ones who do get paid and get featured and things like that, that's where they fine tune their material. That's where they try to practice it every night to an audience until they get their quote unquote, we call it a tight 5, a tight 3 minute three. That means a 3 minute set or a 5 minute set, 15, whatever. That's like that's been kind of like validated, and so that you can perform it to a real paid gig. So yeah, that's kind of like how the economics on that works. And yeah.
That makes sense. It's unpaid, but the exposure, the practice, makes the time slot a much coveted slot. A couple more questions, Janelle. We're gonna stay at Q&A for some time. This one is from Akbar. Ask you to tell a joke. We'll eventually get to that, Akbar. A question from Aimi. So the question is social anxiety and stand-up comedy. Let me try to attempt to elaborate on this question, and Aimi, you can write out the full question. I think it has to do with the two topics, kind of related to each other, but not exactly the same. Social anxiety is that feeling of being in a group, that uneasiness, and stand-up comedy being a creative art form, being out there. And Janelle, you've spoken quite openly about your social anxiety, and yet you are proactively challenging yourself to be out there, to be in a vulnerable position and tell a joke that may or may not bomb. And can you tell us about how you correlate the two concepts together? And I do have a feeling that stand-up comedy, not put words into your mouth, it is a way for you to get rid of that internal inhibition in a way, to be from someone who's so concerned about how they are perceived by others to someone who's just throwing themselves out there and doesn't really care about being judged, that braveness and courage. So there's definitely some benefits to it. And Janelle, I'd like to hear your experience and thoughts.
Yeah, definitely agree with what how you've expressed it. Um, and definitely I I've experienced social anxiety, and but I think they can be like distinct entities. I think, like, it's so funny because I still have social anxiety, and even when I'm going to shows now, I just like thinking about, like, okay, you're gonna perform, but like interacting with other people in the venue, I'm in a corner. I still have that social anxiety. Like, it's just something that I don't remember your exact words about inhibition, and but I a lot of how it helps me is because it is something that's very challenging, that when I overcome it, it's very exhilarating. It's kind of like the challenge I impose on myself of just getting out there and getting on stage and just, just like, it's kind of like an ultimate form of embarrassment, just because you're so bare, it feels like, especially for my material, it's very personal. It's not like, always about social issues. It's about my thoughts on them. It's about or sometimes I have like, just, just from personal experience, my personal, sometimes roasting myself and writing something about that. That is breaking my ego, I think. And to be able to actually go on stage and do that is something that feels like such an achievement after. So that's why, that's how it helps me as someone with social anxiety. But still, you can have, I think you can, I still, I think it's, on stage is different from like interacting with people, because especially if you don't know anyone, it still can be present, but definitely helps, I think. So yeah.
I like how you put it, the ultimate form of embarrassment. And I would be, if I were you, I would be very proud for putting myself in that position and, almost voluntarily going through a rejection therapy in a way. And,
Oh yeah.
right? Because it's very real. Sometimes you can get a supportive audience and people will cheer and laugh at you. But the timing of the laughs, you can tell if the joke worked or not. So absolutely, I would be very proud of myself just by being there, just by being up there and tell jokes, irregardless of how the jokes turn out. Another question, Janelle, from Sir Casper, and this is a really good question. He asked, have you ever faced backlash or criticism in open mic for telling a joke on a sensitive topic, and how did you respond? Excellent question.
Yeah. Thank you, Sir Casper, for that question. But I don't think I've ever faced like direct backlash on anything. I have to admit, I do get into, let's just say, sensitive topics, or not sensitive topics, but just like maybe controversial issues. The thing is, like, people who go to these shows, they're not usually the sensitive ones. They're usually the ones that know, like, and enjoy, this sort of kind of show. Um, Besides, during shows like this, there's usually a disclaimer at the beginning if you're easily offended and things like that. I think a lot of comedians that I'm with have definitely like experienced that, especially the audiences who just were incidentally, in the show. But nothing direct. Most of the like audience are, know what they're getting into. It's they're not really that sensitive or easily offended. So yeah.
That's good to know, the live audience. I guess, Sir Casper, so this question is quite relevant to our day and age with the social media and the recording. It's not the live audience that I'm I'm seeing this question applying to.
Mm.
It's those who got recorded just a tiny bit out of the entire set and get posted somewhere in the not you or anyone that you know, but people who got canceled because they said something that was taken out of context and offended not one single individual but a group of individuals. And
No.
maybe not speaking from your own experience, what would you do if something like this happened?
Wow. I've never thought of it because yeah, definitely something that's relevant right now. What would I do? Hmm. I don't know if like I'll need to explain. I think my based on my principles, like I wouldn't just I would just know, or maybe try and explain the context or um the situation, but not really in a defensive trying to defend myself way, but just so that to give people context and have them make their own judgments on it.
Mm.
But yeah, but I don't. But again, like maybe if that happens, I don't know how I will really react. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Provide enough information in a non-defensive way. And oftentimes, like you said, you may not have to explain in all situations. Sometimes these voices will die off on their own. I just got another ping. Let's take a look at this. There's a question, another one from, so Sir Casper, I'd like to move on to the next segment, which we've all been in. Right after that, we'll take a break and we'll address your question here. This is another question from Sir Casper. Hold on, we'll get to you. The next segment is something that I've been waiting for. Don't tear up. We'll get to you, Sir Casper. You've asked a lot of questions. We've gotten to every single one this far. The next segment is about the formula, Janelle, you talked about before this show and also just moments ago when you described the way when you started. The challenge that you faced was when you wrote jokes, you told stories that you found funny and in your own words, and you didn't realize that there are formulas, there are common construct of writing a joke, and there are guidelines comedians follow. And now we have a group of very general group of people with a general understanding of stand-up comedy, and we don't have that special knowledge, that construct. And I'd like you to give us a 101. What are some of the process when it comes to writing jokes, and do you have a particular formula or method that you follow?
So yeah, like everyone's process is different. But I get I've been advised the same thing over and over again, and it's worked great. Which is, every time you think of something funny, it's just your daily life, right? You think of something that can be a bit or a material, you write it down, and it's funny because hanging out with comedians, that's how they are. Oh, that can be a bit. That can be a bit. And when you have that idea, that can be the premise to a joke. The like one of the basic or foundations they've always said about writing jokes that work, meaning like that actually get an audience, like resonate with the audience, is creating a premise from that idea and then a punchline and delivering it with great timing, like with in a way that can actually the audience will actually resonate with it. Timing is very, very important too. It's something that I've learned later on. I mean, it's like you understand that it's important, but it's when you really perform and you see that it's I can say that I've delivered a joke and it's the same joke for one night, and then in a different night I delivered the same joke in a different timing, in the premise and the punchline in one breath, no laughs, because you have to give time for the audience to process the setup, which is the premise, and then the punchline, which is that thing that makes the joke funny at the end. So essentially, that's it, and that's what I kept on hearing the seasoned comedians say about beginners. Like, if you really want to be funny, if you really want your type five, premise, punchline. If you have enough material, if you have enough material that's actually something that usually works, you know? And a lot of like a lot of like, I guess not beginners or stand open micers, they, I mean, we start off with storytelling. That's another type of telling a joke, and it's very actually advanced. It sounds like a comedian, say Bill Burr, is just like talking about his day, but it's really more constructed than that, and the way he makes it sound so natural. That's the talent. That's a skill that when I was starting out, I was just like it sounded like I was just rambling, but eventually when I did incorporate these, concepts, I got to land some jokes that, that I could fine tune into like a tight 3 or a tight 5. So yeah, essentially that's it.
So what I learned is three key things. Janelle, you will come to know that I'm a terrific study note taker. The premise, and my understanding of that is the setup, is all the information that you will need to provide to the audience before the punchline. In the timing, that's the third thing. So premise, punchline, and timing. In the timing, what I took away was you want to give the audience enough time to process the premise. And I believe there's more to timing as well. And I'd also like you to talk more about how you construct the punchline. And for me, my punchline's too wordy, and it just takes too long, and then people get confused. So if you could give us an example, also to Akbar's request to tell a joke, second time request already. If you have a very simple joke and you can illustrate how to apply these three concepts to that example, that would be two birds, one stone.
Oh my gosh, I'm not prepared with anything, like, because I don't know if I if I'm able to share like the jokes that I wait. Let me check um some jokes.
Yeah,
Here another yeah, another thing that I've learned with this craft that's so interesting is people really do like, especially the comedians who really appreciate this as in an art form, is they really have this list or this dedicated notebook. It's funny because like when you're in an open mic, you don't know who's a comedian and who's not, but anyone with a small notebook, that's you can tell. And so yeah, I have this list of jokes here, but like I don't um
For those who are listening, Janelle's most of her jokes are in Filipino, so there's a bit of a context switch. So that's why it's going to be a little harder for her to tell a joke in English without that cultural context switch. And Janelle, to you, maybe it doesn't have to be funny, but more for illustration purpose so that we can understand the joke writing formula. That's the intent here. And everyone's cheering you. Pigeon Man, Akbar's cheering you, Ray's cheering you. This is a safe audience also, Janelle. We are all either your fans or your grandson, your family member. Leo as well, Tosca, Sir Casper. You can do this.
Oh my gosh. I am looking at my list of jokes here and I don't think anything is like safe or it's all shocking. I don't know. Okay. But in terms of the process, as I've mentioned, so you think of an idea or a thing that you think is funny, and that's where your starting point. And from there, you have a premise. Usually, I start with the premise. Some comedians, they start with a punchline. So I have this joke. Dude, this is so hard.
Janelle, let me rescue you. I believe there is a bot that does that joke. Let me just see if I can do this.
Joke.
Without geometry, life is pointless. Maybe we can find the joke. Remember, the best angle to approach a problem is the triangle. Okay, this won't work. We'll need the premise.
Okay.
Do you have one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I can have a premise here. Yeah, so guys, this isn't necessarily funny, but so my premise is, so I grew up in a well-off family, but now I'm struggling. So that's it. Actually, I usually deliver it simply like that. So, I grew up in a well-off family, but now I'm struggling. And then ... You kind of sometimes you elaborate a little bit more on that setup, right? Just to lead them to the punchline. And then after, timing and everything, then you deliver your punchline. There's so many rules and things like that as well that, those are just other things that we learn along the way. But the punchline is not relevant to, I don't know, it's pretty contextual for the Philippines, but yeah, something like that. I don't know, guys. I'm sorry. Thanks, Akbar.
They're going crazy with the jokes in the stage chat channel now. So I grew up in a well-off family and now I'm struggling. So is that supposed to be the punchline, or that's something you wrote down in the notebook?
Yeah, that's the premise.
That's the
so
premise.
That's just setting up the yeah.
And then?
But that's what I wrote.
So it's an inspiration from your daily life, and as we go back to the joke writing process, something that happened to you on a day-to-day basis, and you thought that's funny and you wrote it down on the notebook. So right now on your notebook, you have written down, I grew up in a wealthy family, from a well-off family, but now I'm struggling, ... And then some point when you have time to sit down in a coffee shop, I'm just imagining now, you would further write out the joke elaborate on the premise and how does that work, Janelle?
Yeah, because usually I start for the premise and then, yeah, I write it down and the punchline usually comes immediately after. The thing that I process like when I get to sit on it is how it's constructed, how I say it, what in what manner. Usually that's how the joke is formed. The skeleton, the basic skeleton, is the setup and the punchline because that's how I surround, or that's what the words or the editing revolves around.
And for this premise, are you working on the skeleton and the editing now, or have you already finished that process for this particular premise?
Yeah, I did have like a punchline for that. It's funny because it's just one of the safer, I guess, like jokes that I could say here.
Okay. I'm gonna mute
But
myself and then the stage is yours. Yay.
oh no, but it's funny because that joke didn't work. uh, or I feel like it was the delivery, something like that. But yeah, the punchline is very local, like contextual to the Philippines. So I don't think it would make much sense to a lot of people here. But I also also don't write the word for word the joke, of course. And I usually what I do is I practice how I'm going to deliver it before a show. So right now I am actually I'm not prepared for a joke, delivering a joke.
But from this example, but would you be able to share the punchline just so we have an example?
Let me see. Yeah, so the punchline was like, how did I say it? Oh my gosh, I forgot. It was something about like jeepneys. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what a jeepney is. It's like this. Oh man, how do I describe it? Like it's a public transport vehicle here in the Philippines. It's very, very simple. It's like the cheapest form of public transportation, and everyone. It's just anyway. So the jeepney is kind of like, oh my gosh, it's so different to deliver a punchline because like the tone, you have to be specific about how you deliver it in the tone. And I just said that a jeepney, it reminds me, I still think that even though like I'm not rich anymore, I still have that mentality. So when I ride jeepneys, oh, I'm like in a party limousine and like a clubhouse. I have clubhouses like kind of like from the rich people have their clubhouse. We have barangay halls. So that's also something that is contextual. Like it's something that's very, how do I describe it? It's like
I can
something
see
that,
that.
yeah. So the that is a place where the community just like uh goes for so oh my gosh, like
Like
how
community
to
center.
describe that. Yeah, like yeah, so that's the idea behind the joke, guys. This isn't a representation of my material. I'm sorry.
It's
Just the
not it's
process.
not fair. It's not fair. There's so much that's lost in the cultural difference. Like we said at the very beginning of this show, Janelle tells most of her jokes in Filipino, and here the punchline involves cultural recognition of a vehicle in public that's the cheapest and probably in the poorest condition. In she contrasted with the limousine. And so that poor rich contrast. And then another thing is the community center that, you know, I grew up from China, so people would play mahjong or dance, square dance, and contrast that with a clubhouse where fancier sports are being played and rich people hang out and socialize with each other. So that's the joke. But if you could imagine in Filipino that those two concepts and contrasts were just four simple words that resonate with the people, and that sharp contrast, that's quite funny, right?
Oh my gosh. I love how you broke it down.
I can imagine that. I've watched enough. I can imagine that. So I hope that that's really, really good, because this example illustrated that process to me. And if I were to, so Janelle would start with picking up ideas from her daily life, and she writes it down in her notebook. It could be a simple line as, I grew up well off, and now I'm struggling, ... And there is a punchline that needs to be carefully crafted. But the delivery of it, Janelle would more rely on a live performance, more improvised manner. But the three key components, the premise, and I could imagine, I'm filling blank here, I could imagine Janelle talks about the environment that she was born into and grew up in, and how she turned from being well off into now struggling financially. And then with the perfect timing, deliver the punchline with the jeepney and the limousine, clubhouse versus community center. And the art is during live performance, the timing of slowing it down while conveying all the information needed for the audience to process the premise, and then the perfect timing with a surprise to deliver the punchline. So that's what I learned from this conversation, Janelle. And please correct me if there's anything that I misunderstood.
Definitely, definitely great job of expressing, of saying that. I think you got it down. I think, yeah. I was thrown off by uh, preparing a bit, but yeah, definitely accurate. Everything you said.
And I thought that was hilarious. I'm imagining you
Really?
delivering that. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, usually it's my material is so personal. That's why, and people, I feel like people can see that people, when people look at you, they have a judgment of you, right? So like a lot of the times I pick on those assumptions, and sometimes there's material in that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Janelle, like, now let's go back to Sir Casper's question. Let me just scroll up. Janelle, what's your take on women are not funny?
It's something that I've heard a lot. It was something that, like, before I didn't really pay much attention to. I mean, I noticed that here in particular, most of the stand-up comedians were men. It was just something that I thought that was a hobby that was just male dominated. I didn't really think about the issue of, hey, women aren't funny. Every time there was a female comedian in stand-up comedy, especially before here in the Philippines, they really appreciate it. It's something that they always feel like they think it's refreshing. They're very supportive. Most of they, meaning the comedians, the people who are behind stand-up comedy. I've gotten comments after shows that, hey, oh my gosh, it's such a testosterone fest here. Like it's so refreshing to just hear women a feminine voice. I mean, in terms of figuratively, and now like the that is picking up because as I mentioned earlier in the earlier more and more women have been are becoming successful in the local stand-up comedy scene, which is really great. They have their own group, and they produce their own shows. It's but that's also an issue because a lot of this one I've heard from the scene is they say that you know women are succeeding because if you're a woman you already have an advantage because people like to look at you, and that was definitely I feel like disproven by the talented comedians in the scene. Very very clever material, and I think a lot of the male comedians support that. I, just one anecdote. There was this one time I attended an open mic where it was at the same time as one of the shows produced by this women. It was I think I don't know. It was if it was Women's Month, but it was just a celebration of women in comedy and LGBT actually in comedy. So just the minority. And I was in the other show because I just it was incidental that I was in that show where it was all male because all the women were in the other show. And at the green room or at the room where just the comedians talk and discuss and just hang out, one of the comedians were like, "How do you feel about like that? You're the only woman here. Like, how do you?" Then one of them commented that, "Yeah, because women are not funny," something like that, and they just like, it's still a thing. It's still very much, it's still a thing, but like what I've felt in the comedy scene here is more supportive, really. Like maybe they can pick off that stereotype or that cliche as a joke, but in general, here it's just a really motivating and supportive community, kind of like the Mouthfuls. But yeah, but definitely a lot of people probably have that notion. I'm not sure, but you know, a lot of funny women comedian can just disprove that easily, I think. So yeah.
Yeah. I sometimes come across the notion of yin, you're a female host. And I looked at that, I think I am a host. Why am I a female host? I am a host. My job is to facilitate a discussion at the Mouthfuls. My job is to encourage people to speak to a group. I'm not a female host. I'm just a host. Yes, very interesting question and interesting discussions. And that's not to say that the evolution that you described from a majorly male-dominated industry in comedy, in live performance, to now higher participation by female comedians. And that's a great thing to see. And all the initiatives to highlight historically marginalized groups, LGBTQ, and the signs of discrimination on gender basis or sexual orientation basis, the initiatives are extremely valuable to correct the any inequality that happened in the past and are still happening. And Janelle, let's go back to today's event. We're close to the end. I'd like to wrap up today's session with 2 questions, and I hope you could answer them. The first one is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received about doing stand-up comedy? And how has it helped you? And finally, if you could share what's next for you. There was a question that came up, whether you would do this as a full-time job. So that was a question I wanted to ask you. You sort of answered it, but if there's any important information that I haven't asked, please do share before we wrap up.
So, for the
best piece of
like
advice and what's next for you.
For the best piece of advice, oh my gosh, there's a lot, but I think like number one would be consistency, because that's how you develop your skill. It's one thing to keep on writing material and editing it, but like to be able to perform it in a live audience, that's how you know, that's how you fine tune yourself, that's how you know what works and what doesn't, and that's how you find your voice. So when I was struggling about my material and how it's hard for me to write, one of the comedians just mentioned, she was so supportive. She was like, you know what, just keep on doing the open mics, really, because that's the thing that will make you figure out your voice, what material you want to use, and so yeah, consistency and for the what's next, yeah, definitely already covered most of it. For me, it's like I just love signing up for the open mic shows, and definitely a lot of opportunities there, because of the general, like, people who are in the productions. So, but for now, I'm just enjoying the show. I'm just enjoying the recreational aspect of it. It's I've gotten invited to for other shows, but I just haven't. I just want to commit if I'm ever going to be really serious about something. So right now it's just fun. It's just something that I do because I appreciate the craft a lot.
For the love of it, and as a hobby, as a side passion.
Exactly.
And I also love the advice that you gave. The consistency of performing in, I can relate to that a lot. That process of experimenting with yourself in a way, and you need to give it time, right? You need to give it time to try this and then see how the audience reacts to it, and then try that. In that zigzag journey of eventually coming to find your unique voice. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's very inspirational.
Yeah, I think that applies to not just like stand-up comedy, but a lot of other things that you'd like to, work on, right? Like communication or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no one cookie cutter that can just cut you into a certain way and then you're the best now. There is something about you that you need to discover and present it and express it in a way that makes an impact in the world. And you're absolutely right. That's not just stand-up comedy. That could apply to your chosen career path, could apply to your personality, how you present yourself to the world. So many other things, how you live your life. I love it. Definitely. We're getting philosophical here, Janelle. I couldn't end today's conversation at a better note. Thank you so much, Janelle, for your time. And I thoroughly
Oh,
enjoyed every moment of this, and I learned a ton about writing jokes. Thank you so much for devoting your time. I just got a ping. I want to take a look if there's any final message question from. Let me read. Just a cat. Very interesting. That's Leo. Thanks for the event. And Ralphel. Well, I think women generally are not funny. Uh-oh. It's more or less. He's entitled to his opinion. It's more or less changing because of this dumb movement of feminism. Go to a different culture, not this West weak-minded people. I'm not saying women are not funny, but it's generally true. And we shouldn't change this opinion just because of some kind of movement. Opinion should be changed by experience, not others' beliefs. Like I said, people are entitled to free speech and in their opinion. I think the truth of this statement is women not riding the movement of gender equality and get advantaged in any way. There is some truth to that belief, and to me, I do believe that for any line of work, I'd like to see it's merit based. Like I said earlier, I'm a host. And when you look at me, you look at how I host an event. You don't look at me as a female host or a male host. That's one day what I hope to see. But any discrimination or inequality needs to be addressed. So blatantly ignoring that is also not the way to go. Somewhere we will have to strike a balance. Anyway, so that we're going off the topic. Last comment from Ray. Thanks for sharing your experience, Janelle, and amazing tips. And to me, thanks for hosting this event. Really enjoyed myself. Same here. Tosca's also typing. We're going to end here, Janelle. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed as well. But thank you again for waking up that early for this event. And I also thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you guys.
Yeah, I believe everyone enjoyed it. Just look at the stage chat channel. There's so many hypes. Janelle, all your friends and supporters are here. All right. Bye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.